Welcome. My name is Dan Smith, and today we are rejoined by Rob Talbot, the Executive Director of Josiah White's Quakerdale Foundation. Welcome back, Rob.
Thanks. Great to talk again.
You know, previously you walked us through the history of the Quakerdale Foundation. We also talked about why the foundation exists and how you're accomplishing your mission by providing facilities, awarding grants, growing dynamic leaders, and then providing trainings in fundraising and communication to your ministry partners. We have also taken a deeper look into ministry partners and facilities. Today, however, I'd like to explore grants. Are you ready to go to this one?
Let's do it.
All right. First of all, step us through, like from the 10,000-foot elevation, the overall process from start to finish of what the grant process looks like so that people got an idea of what they will experience when they get involved in this.
So we use an online form at this point. Now that could change in the future, but we use an online form. So when somebody thinks they might be a candidate to receive a grant from, or is curious to know if they could be a candidate to receive a grant from the foundation, generally what happens is I'm going to have a phone call with them. I'm going to have some sort of a communication with them, learn a little bit more about what's going on, making sure that what they do is a good match. We don't want to waste anybody's time that they're going to go through filling out an application and just isn't a good match. And so my job on behalf of the board is to kind of take a quick review, make sure things are on the right page. Now, if they are, then when it becomes application season for the foundation, we send out grant applications to those who we've had that kind of conversation with. And then they fill out this online application form. And once that's filled out and we hit our deadline, and the deadline has been known to change, but right now, this is an annual process. We don't do quarterly grants. We don't do monthly grants. We do annual grants. And it's not a fast system, unfortunately. But so we start the application for grants usually around February. And then they need to be in by the deadline, which is usually probably around May of that same year. That allows the grant committee from the board to begin reviewing those grants and speaking with those people who have made application. And through that process, the grant committee from the board is made up of board members will spend a little time talking to them, learning a little more about what they do. And then then by the middle of that year, the foundation finance committee will have decided how much money we've got to grant for the next year. And so at that point in time, the finance committee will say, here's how much money we've got available to grant. And then the grant committee will make recommendations to the whole board as to how they like the funds available for that year to be granted to their grant recipients. After that, if the board approves that or whatever the board approves, usually around September or at the latest, usually by our November board meeting, then those grant recipients will be informed and then they will begin receiving grants for the next year. By the end of the first grant distribution, if it's larger than $10,000, that'll be quarterly grants. If it's less than $10,000, they'll receive their full grant amount by the end of January of the next year.
Okay. So let me
That's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah, let me just quickly review it. So it sounds to me like what basically happens is there's these parts. If you're not already receiving grants or you're not already in a relationship with the foundation, there's an interview that goes on first just to make sure that there's a good fit. Because This is about doing ministry together. It's not about just getting money. We're beginning to build a relationship between the ministry and the foundation to serve the kingdom of God and make sure that it's honored and it's just a good fit. Okay, so once that's taken care of, then the application part starts out by filling out an online application sometime between February and May, roughly. You need to have that done and in. Then once the deadlines reach, those applications are reviewed by the grant committee. The grant committee then submits a list of the grants that are being requested by applicants to the finance committee, who then decides how much money you actually have to go ahead and grant. And then they give, goes back to the grant committee, who then makes a recommendation to the board, this amount of money to each of these people based on how much is available. And then the board decides the final decision, what happens. Once that's all taken care of, then somewhere around the end of November, first part of December, notification is given to the people that have made the applications, whether they're receiving or not, and how much money, and then the funds come in basically sometime by the end of January. Is that kind of a good overview?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
good. Okay, shoot, that's great. Are there restrictions, or is there a group of people that are eligible to apply, or is it just open for anybody?
So we stipulate that you need to be a nonprofit to apply for a grant. And if you're going to receive a grant, there needs to be, it needs to be for children or families. So if it's not for children or families, can't make a strong link to that, then, I will have already kind of weeded that out in my interview. But then there also needs to be a Christian component. There has to be something that that is noteworthy about introducing people to Christ, the story of salvation. Now, we're not looking to proselytize folks. We just have our own mission. Our founder, Josiah White, said he wanted to teach people about God, or the Quaker ways, and he wanted to give them skills for living, vocational, mostly skills. So we have to be true to our namesake, as well as making sure that fits with who we are. So a nonprofit need to have helping children or families, and it has to have some sort of a Christian component to it in service.
Okay. So it sounds like basically anybody can go ahead and make contact with the foundation and say, we're really interested in beginning the process of applying for a grant. We'd like to go ahead and do the interview. And now you connect with them and just decide if there's a good fit. If there's not, then that's the end of the process. If there is, then we can continue. So there's kind of that gate there that you have the responsibility of deciding whether or not there's going to be a good pairing here based on what the charity's about, and whether or not there is a faith-based component to what they're doing, and so forth.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's in this discussion whether or not they're a great fit for a grant. Sometimes we can still help them in some of the other ways we've talked about, right? Not just, money grants are just one of the ways that we help folks. And so, a lot of times we'll find that maybe they're eligible for a grant, but there's not any funds right now, or it's not in the right time in the cycle. And so we can help in other ways.
Sure.
But it's just the idea of deciding, is this a good fit? And then starting into that cycle if it's an option, and maybe there's some other ways that we can help.
Sure. So basically what you're telling us is that when it comes to assisting people who are doing charitable work, we want to help any way that we can.
Right.
Grants is just one small way that could happen. There are a whole lot of other ways that we can help you with what you're doing that may go away from the grant process. But when it comes to grant, it's the interview that's the main kicker that kind of decides who can take the next step and who it's probably not going to work out. But that doesn't mean they're not eligible for assistance with all the other things that the foundation has available.
Yes, and I guess I don't want it to seem as though I'm making the gate very narrow for grant applications, because I don't think I do. I'm just making sure that it's kind of got the basics, that they're meeting the basics, and it's a reasonably good fit. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. That makes sense. There's a lot of foundations out there that are very specific to things like, helping people who have had the loss of an infant, and so they don't have the monies to cover funeral expenses and so forth. So if somebody was was applying to that for starting a softball team, probably not a good a good match. That's just not really the functionality of the foundation. So you just want to make sure that it's not whether it's a good cause or not. It's just a matter of whether it's a good fit for why we exist is all.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
Once the grant process gets underway and so far, is there any kind of reporting requirements that are part of this process as well?
So if you do receive a grant from the foundation and it's less than $10,000, then there is a 6-month and an annual report. So at the end of the grant season, 12 months later, after you receive your grant, we want to know how it went. But along the way, we want to hear, and that usually has the mid-year grant is a little more basic. We just want to make sure that you're financially operating, I think, in many ways. Those grants less than $10,000 have less supervision. But if there is a grant and it's more than $10,000, that means that we are going to be doing reviews every month. I meet with anybody who is receiving a grant of $10,000 or more, not rigidly, but pretty responsibly, once a month, where we just touch base. Could be 15 minutes, could be an hour. It depends on what somebody wants. If they want some support, help. But I'm there to see how things are going, see if something's not working right that we could help with or figure out together. And so that happens for those larger ones. But in the same way as a smaller grant, there's still a 6-month review. There's an end of year grant review. How did you do towards your measurable objectives? That's a category on the grant. What's your measurable objectives in why you're going to use these resources? And
sure.
So we want to hear how'd that go.
Okay, well that sounds reasonable. It sounds to me like the processes are set up to make sure that that everything is going okay with the people who are receiving the grants, that they're not alone, because sometimes isolation is a big killer of a lot of, especially small nonprofits. They just get so caught up in what they're doing, they really don't have anybody to touch base with. And so by being able to have at least to connect twice a year gives the foundation an extra opportunity to help in other ways beyond just the granting of the money, but to be there to support them in many other ways as well.
I think that's the main reason. Now, there is a fiduciary. I mean, we have kind of a fiduciary role here. I mean, if we're supporting somebody and they're really not doing a good job, if things aren't going well, then I have another role sometimes that comes in there too. And I say, I'd like to know a little bit more about what's going on here, because we've heard from the community. This is happy. You were in the newspaper. I don't know, but we want to know. We want to make sure that what we're supporting is actually doing what you said, and that it still fits who we are. And there have been occasions when the board has said, based on what we've heard and what's going on, we want some added documentation about what we originally wanted, because we want to make sure that people gave money to the foundation to help good causes. And if we're not doing our role, we're not making sure that what's going on is good, then we're not doing our job.
Sure.
And so that's what that's about as well.
Sure. Yeah, that goes into the next question, that obviously the money comes from somewhere, because you don't generate an income in and of yourself. So this helps build integrity with your donor base, that we're doing everything we can to make sure the money that you are donating to the foundation for us to do this kind of work is being spent wisely and being good stewards of it. So the next obvious question is so how do you get your funds? Where does it come from? You certainly don't just pluck it out of the sky.
No. So Quakerdale, the entity, has had many names over the years. We've talked about the history, 180 years, something like that, coming up on. So people have given through time, and through time, there were memorial gifts, honorarium gifts, and estates that were given to Quakerdale. And those pieces went into what we call our endowment. Those pieces of donations, and when people give an honorarium, a memorial to celebrate someone's life or to honor someone who's living, or as well as when they give the ultimate gift of an estate gift to the foundation, those dollars never get spent. They get put in the endowment, and then we award grants off of the growth of our investments. And so that's where the money comes from. It's many decades of that kind of giving. And as we encourage people to give annual giving, like by the month, by the year, to a mission that they love, maybe it's something that we grant to as well, we encourage them to give that money to them. But when we talk about long-term, lifelong, eternal gifts, then we are encouraging people to think about the foundation for that. There's not a lot of places that have such a strong Christian heritage, a strong experience that we can talk about, helping good causes for children and families, specifically for children and families with a Christian component. And so we believe that there are people, and we know that there are people out there who value that and know that if they give it to the foundation, that money will never go away. It's never going to get lost. It's not going to be at risk for the same kind of litigation that if they were to give that bigger chunk of money to a specific ministry, that they might, get sued and everything get taken away. And so when you give to a foundation like this, then and that's the design. That's why the foundation's here, to make it safe for those gifts to always be there.
Sure. So it sounds to me then, I think one of the terms we use in the fundraising world is planned giving or endowment giving. So it sounds to me like that's a big component of what you do, where people can leave a bequest in a will, or through end-of-life issues or trusts or things like that. Like you said, memorials and honorariums, that these gifts go to kind of like a savings account, so to speak, and that earns investment income from it, and that's what you use to do your grants then.
Yes, and I think some people may say, well, I'm going to give my money to my kids, and that's probably the way it should be. We talk about, a lot of times, organizations or foundations like us, we talk about maybe 1% of somebody's estate. Would you be willing to give 1%, 5%, and the rest goes to the kids? And sometimes people don't have heirs, and they want a good place for their legacy, and that is a wonderful situation where we can carry that forward as well. So yeah, that's how we as a foundation operate.
So other than the grants that you help fund or give to organizations that apply, those that receive those funds, are there other resources that they can tap into that are available through the foundation?
Yeah, are you talking different than the coaching types of stuff? I mean, yeah. So I'm just making sure I'm not missing something. But the main thing that I would normally talk to people about is we help nonprofits who are learning how to operate. Somebody's got a vision, they have a heart for something, a ministry and it's a good match for the foundation, and we want to help them be successful. There are hundreds of thousands of new ministries that fail every year because they didn't get off on the right foot. And we believe that it's more than money. It's actually far more than money that makes organizations successful. It has to do with leadership, has to do with good governance issues, has to do with fundraising. And so those are the pieces that we want to help organizations beyond just giving them money.
So I would think that probably most of the people that you are granting funds to, you're also helping in many other ways as well.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, is to, we want to invest in organizations that we think have a promise, a future, that they are valuable not only right now, but we want them to exist into the future in the long term.
Great. That's super.
without us, right? I mean, the ultimate thing is make them so successful that they don't need another grant in the future. They really are really doing great, and then we can go help somebody else as well.
Sure. Well, Rob, that's a lot of great information. It sounds to me that if you're out there and you are really interested in possibly pursuing not only a grant from the foundation, but actually tapping into the expertise that the foundation has and helping you grow and manage your nonprofit, that the first step would be to use the information that's on the screen here to either send you an email or give you a call and say, hey, I'd like to talk about how we might be able to partner together here and do ministry. Would probably be the next step. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, Robin, just thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it. That's some great information.
Glad to do it.
And thank you for joining me. If you've got any other questions or if you'd like to learn more about the foundation and their grant process, use the contact information that's right here on the screen, or you can go into the description of any of these recordings and find the links that'll take you to the connects that you need to at that point. So until next time, let's get out there and serve as Christ serves.